When you've been really stuck for, days or weeks or God forbid years, sometimes the way to get moving is just to kind of look at everything fresh. And I'm seeing a lot of people around me with that kind of deer in the headlights look of, when they're trying to focus on anything and like what's going on right now in the world, it just means that things are super crazy and hard to focus. And so this is a really good time for the restart process, which is, the restart process is designed to really put you back in the driver's seat. And instead of just feeling like waves of stuff are kind of hitting you in the face and you don't have any time or focus to deal with any of it, it's really about making decisions, figuring out what's actually important, what's actually happening right now, and going from there. So let me just have a quick mic check, make sure everything's fine. I see people saying hello, nobody complaining yet, so that's awesome. And we are again streaming from my Facebook page, so be aware that this is a publicly available event. See, you guys are all showing up. That's awesome. So once again, I am Jessica Abel from jessicaabel.com, and today we're going to talk about how to really implement a fresh start, a restart for your focus in general, not just creative focus, but of course that's my main focus, is trying to get you guys and put you in a position where you can work on your creative work, but really focus for kind of anything. And I originally wrote this chapter as a blog post when I first moved to Philadelphia. And I was moving from France, and I was starting a new job as the chair of illustration at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And I had been on the road and moving and doing all this stuff for like 8 weeks. And I was sitting in my office, and I had all of these new classes to develop. And I had to get back into routine. School was starting in like a week or two. And I just felt totally overwhelmed by all the stuff. Home was chaotic. We had to get them ready for school, all that other stuff going on. And I was just like, I would just sit there like a zombie staring at my stuff, just be like, I have no idea. And what I did then, and what I sort of then developed into more of a process, is kind of like a compressed version, like a super, super schematic version of the entire Growing Gills creative focus process. So here's how it goes. And I want for you guys to ask questions about this as we go along. Make sure to label them question so that I can find them in the chat. But first of all, I want to ask you, who feels like they need a hard restart right now? Who feels like, despite all the stuff we've been doing in the book club, despite everything else, it's just like there's just too much going on and it's just too overwhelming. If you feel that way, please let us all know. We can support you through this. And then maybe just, I know that the book Growing Gills is like, it's long, it's complicated, there's a lot of stuff in it. It can feel overwhelming just to do all those things. And so in some ways, just doing this one chapter can kind of stand in for the whole thing for a period of time. So I'd love to hear from you guys about how that's feeling for you right now and how that's hitting. So go ahead and get that in the chat. And if this seems like a topic that is really interesting to you, then make sure, you're sharing it with people who need it. So the main thing as I was rereading this chapter is realizing that it goes through kind of all the parts, the main points that we've been going through in the book club over and over again. First of all, that being stuck is something that happens to everybody sometimes, and it isn't an occasion for self-blame. It's an occasion for being curious and trying to figure out what's going on, and for self-forgiveness, understanding that things happen, and this is just kind of the way it is. This is what life looks like sometimes. And one of the things that it says in the chapter that I think is really helpful is self-blame is not useful. Action is useful. Action is the only thing that's going to change the way you feel. Which can feel very self-defeating too, because like, if you don't feel like you can get an action, you feel stuck, right? So it can be a sort of catch-22 situation. But so the two main things that I think when you're in the situation of needing new focus, that you should be looking at initially is, I'm getting the comments in now. Something happened where they got paused there. Julia says, I don't think I need this now, but it is going to happen. Scylla says, I need a restart. This is it. Okay, Awesome. Teresa, need a restart. Janice, restart for the win. Awesome. Deborah, yes, need a restart, feeling overwhelmed. Joanne, I love this chapter and use it a lot, but not right at this moment. Great. I'm glad this is a go-to for you. It's something you can come back to. And I do want to emphasize that. I think that's a great thing to say, Joanne, that this is something that you can come back to. Just come right to this chapter if you're feeling like just at sea with stuff. Everybody recognizes the feeling. Sonia, Amy, Susie has a question. I think I've been doing my hard restart already. If I hadn't joined this group, I think I'd be wandering lost, beating myself and going downhill mentally. I've got stuff done and have some plans. That is great. So I don't expect, I mean, if you have been following through, showing up at these meetings, being at the book club in general and following through the Growing Gills, you probably don't need a hard restart right now. And you do recognize this, elsewhere. But if people are coming into this meeting not having followed along, or if you're coming here from my page and not from the Growing Gills book club group, then you might really be feeling this. And so there's going to be some differentiation there for sure. Two main things you want to kind of rule out right at the front of your restart situation. If you're feeling really overwhelmed, the first thing you want to rule out is not deciding. is having all the things in front of you and all the options, and you're not taking the time to hit the decide phase of the creative engine and really look at what your options are and decide. And the restart methodology is designed to help you do that. So that's one big piece of it. But if you realize that it's just like you're kind of bouncing from one thing to the other and the other and the other, and you can't keep on anything, then that is something you really need to look at, is like, have I actually decided what I'm going to do now? Because if not, whatever else is on the plate, sitting there in the waiting, in the wings, you're going to be bouncing to that and looking to that, all the time. And the other piece of this is this not just about grit. So if you're trying to force yourself through something, then that is not going to probably function for you. It's not going to work, because it's like this is about making clear choices and understanding what your capacity is right now. So for a lot of people right now in this crisis, our emotional and our resilience is being challenged by all of the things that are going on, not just the sort of things we need to do, like helping kids with homeschool or whatever else, trying to figure out how to work from home, those kinds of things, but also just anxiety about what's happening in the world, uncertainty about what's coming in the future. These are all things that diminish our capacity. And so, again, trying to rule out or diminish self-blame and understand that it's fine if you feel that way, and maybe you do have a diminished capacity right now to actually focus, that's okay. Just use what you have and develop that little bit that you do have. So going back to the comments here, Lot says, I need a restart at breaking down my project into steps. I feel like ask all the questions is complicated because asking the smaller questions is doing the task already. I have to come up with story characters before I can ask questions about them. Well, I think the main thing is that you're not going to want to break down steps that you're not at yet. If you need to be at that step, then you need to be doing the work. And so doing the QTAs, questions to answer about things, is about understanding what's missing for you. If you need to invent characters in order to move forward, then that is your next step. And so that's what you should be doing. And so the QTA of what do I need in order to move forward? The answer being some new characters. That's doing the job that you need to be doing. And so you don't necessarily need to be looking at the entire arc of how do I build this story, if that's really the next thing you need to be doing. Allie says, question, I was all excited to read the chapter only to open my iPad and discover my son deleted my Kindle app to install Fortnite, no less. Is there any way to download your book again? Yes, if you have it in your Amazon account, you can just download it again. It should be there for you, so don't worry about it. And in fact, if you've made notes and things, they will be there as well. Amazon preserves your digital downloads in a spot in your account, and you can find everything again if you download the app again and delete Fortnite, which is well deserved, I think, if you do that. So Angela says something interesting. I feel like the whole world got a hard restart with the pandemic, and having the time to participate in this group was a type of hard restart for me. I think that's a really good point, and this is one thing that I wanted to talk about today. Um, I've been reading several articles about this idea of this is where we're at right now is a big chance to reset. A lot of ordinary things are we're not doing right now. We're doing more of some things and none of other things. And I've talked to a lot of clients who have felt a little guilty about feeling actually really good about not having those things to do anymore. Um, and and in sort of a more global sense, the way that we're working, the way we're interacting with our jobs and with families and, with friends and so on has changed a lot and has to change right now. And some of those things we miss and we want to put back, but some we may not want to put back. And I think being really thoughtful about what you want to put back into your life as you're allowed to put things back, as the rules, about isolation and so on are relaxed, is, I think, really, really, this is the moment for it. This is your chance. This is your shot at that. If you want to be living differently, this is your shot to be thinking about what that looks like. And, those of you who are here and have been here with me for 6 weeks in this book club, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And I think that it's really important to see you have made time for this. You've made time for this vital work in a way that you haven't done before, or that maybe you have not done before. And I think it's thinking about how you're doing that now, and then figuring out how to hold on to that, how to build that habit and build that space in a way that's going to hold on after this crisis ebbs gradually, will be super, super important. So I think that's all. I think that was a really good point to bring up, Angela. Okay. All right, I'm going to go look for questions in a bit, but I'm going to get back to the actual process. So number one, the first part of the process is self-forgiveness. It's always important when you do some kind of big assessment of what's going on in your life, all the things that are waiting for you, all that other stuff, is to start with self-compassion, start with celebration, start with gratitude, start with things that make you feel good about what's going on with you. And if you're in a place where you're super stuck and feel really, really incapable, that's very difficult to take hold of. That is a really hard step, but it is so necessary to sort of set the groundwork properly so that you can get the most out of this process and make decisions based on what you truly believe and what you truly want, instead of feeling the should monster coming at you and making decisions based on what you think will please other people. So starting even with just the most simple things of like, I am managing to take a shower regularly, good for me. I'm being fed. That's awesome. I'm feeding my children. That's great. Like I'm not killing my children in the middle of their, homeschool days. So starting in that mindset, I think, is really, really important. The second step is going back to kind of the beginning of Growing Gills, beginning of the Creative Focus Workshop, which is clean your desk. Just your desk, not everything, but do a stuff audit wherever you're working, whether that's a backpack or kitchen table or whatever it is, and get everything out and do a mind sweep of all the things that you're bouncing between. So if you're in that state of like, I'm this, I'm that, bouncing from one thing to another, what are those things? Get them out of your head and onto paper so you can look at them. Once you have your list, and you'll continue to build that list, like things will occur to you and they'll come in, then you can start actually categorizing those things. And this is a little bit different than what we do with the idea inventory. It's a little bit different than what we do with the stuff audit. It's a little bit more radical triage, like what is absolutely necessary, where are things just like on fire, and where can things really wait and it's okay. So you're really going to divide up, you're going to make two piles and the first division to make is things you must do versus things you would like to do. And then, and must do can include, I need to write my book. It doesn't have to be things that are like, have deadlines. Must do for you. Like these are musts. These belong in my life. This whole thing I was just talking about of like, what are we going to put back in our lives after this crisis? What are those things? Well, they should include your creative work. So that is a must. Even though it's not urgent, it's not pressing, it is vital. And so vital things go in the must pile. Then you divide divide up into those two piles into two piles. So you have 4 categories now, and can wait. So things that are musts that are now are things that have deadlines, things that are going to blow up if you don't deal with them. Hopefully it's a small pile. If it's a big pile, you really got to spend some time there. You have to get that stuff out of the way. And that doesn't mean everything with the deadline goes there. It means stuff that's like hot right now. You have to do it right now. And I only, I try to like de-emphasize that part of life because I feel like we often put too many things in that category. And I just want to encourage you to really be very, very judicious and say, do I have to do this? And do I have to do this now? Like that. Can it wait till next week? Can it wait till tomorrow? Can I talk to somebody and put this off till next month? Like these are the kinds of things that you can do to try to make that pile smaller and deal with those things. Once you start dealing with those things and you close those loops, you'll start feeling less anxiety and start being able to move forward. Your creative work may be in the must and can wait pile, possibly. It only belongs there, though, if you can keep your now pile small enough to mean that you can get to it tomorrow, the next day, the next day after that. There may be like a couple days when you just have to just absolutely apply yourself to what's right in front of you. Like if you go back to my 2016 blog post when I was arriving at PAFA, I had to do my curriculum. Like I had to write my classes. I didn't have time for anything else. I just had to do that. And that's what I ended up having to decide. So once you have all of those things in place and you have the nows, and you like have to do this right now, get those things one at a time in order and get them on a calendar, get them in a list and do those things. Like commit yourself to those things one at a time. Put one in front of you. Again, I have a person I work with who, had this habit of putting all of the musts now that she was late on or was going to be late on soon on Post-it notes all in front of her at the same time. And so every time she looked at one, she would think about a different one, and then she'd think about the other one, and then the other one. And I told her to take all of the Post-its off and pick one and put it up, one Post-it. Even if they're all now, you can't literally do them all now. So you have to rank them in order and do one at a time. So the biggest piece of this in some ways in terms of focus is once you have all this sorting, you've made your decisions about what happens when you take that list, you just take the one thing you're working on and you hide the list so you can find it again, but you put it in a drawer, you put it face down, you do something with it so you're not looking at it. You're looking at the one thing you need to do. And that's going to really help you move forward. Now, I talked about 4 categories. The trick to this is that there are only actually 3 categories. Anything that is not a must, that is a would like to do and can wait, does not belong on this list. It's not that you will never do anything that falls in that category, but when we're talking about like restart triage, like that bucket should be empty. Those things you don't need to think about at all right now. All right, so getting into the comments here, I see a lot of people talking about not wanting to go back to business as usual, wanting to be clear about what they want back in their lives and what they don't. I think this is so, so important. It's such an amazing opportunity in that sense to really rethink what we want to engage with and how. I'm doing that myself for sure. Julie says, oddly, I've been doing better with growing Gills because I've embraced or pass it. I straight up didn't do a lot of the activities because if I did, I would have fallen behind. But I've made a lot of progress with some of the core things that I did do, like tracking and planning, which has made a world of difference. So now I'm actually confident that I'll be able to keep up going the spiral staircase next time. That's great. And I think that's a really great thing to reemphasize. Having read this book again, I feel like I kitchen sinked it. I put everything I had in here. And, when I think about this compared to the experience of going through the Creative Focus Workshop, which is so much more focused and still can be challenging to get through, there's a lot. So if you're feeling like, oh my God, another thing, you do not need to do all of these things. You do what works and you work with it. And then if you need something else, you can come back and get those things. Essentially, if you're hitting those 4 stages, those 4 phases of the creative engine, you probably have what you need for now, and then you can cycle up the creative engine again, cycle up that spiral staircase on another pass and continue refining. Okay. Susie says that Post-it note problem can cause so much grief. My husband and I do this with home improvement lists. We mention one thing and it snowballs until we feel overwhelmed. Yeah, exactly. So you mention one thing, you make the list, write them all down. Write them down. You don't want them in your head. Then you pick one and put that one visible and put the rest back in wherever you're going to find them again next time when you need to review. Don't have it all in front of you. Make the decision. Take the time to make the decision. Joan has a question. I finally resolved with the help of this group to stop placing short comics in the way of working on the book I want to create. And now that I'm finishing up to the last short story, I've been invited to contribute a short story to an anthology about the COVID crisis. That seems like something worth breaking my rule for, but it also seems like it's feeding a counterproductive habit, so it's presenting a dilemma. Well, Joan, I guess my question for you would be, what are the outcomes that you want out of contributing to this anthology? They could be something having to do with building relationships. Again, it's like looking at the idea of an inventory. So is it relationship building, platform building, build your audience? I assume you're not going to get paid for it, but maybe there's some kind of charity thing that's happening where people who buy it, money's getting donated someplace. And maybe that's a cause that you care about. Like you have to weigh those things and look at those things and how much do they matter. And then look at that compared to continuing your main project. It's this kind of thing is something that comes up all the time for cartoonists. People who are making good work like you do, are going to get opportunities constantly to contribute to some anthology or another anthology. And I get it's the crisis. We're in the middle of this particular time, this particular moment. But unless you already have some sense that like this is something that you have something to say about and you really want to express that thing, and this is an opportunity to do that, it's not an automatic yes. You have to look at it through lenses of like, how does this contribute to various goals or outcomes or visions that I have for myself? How does this work within my structure? There are other people who can fill the pages of this book if you're not there. So it's not a matter of making sure that the pages get filled. It's, do you want to do this and does it make a difference to you? Okay. All right. So I'm looking for questions in the comments. I don't see anything popping up right now, but make sure to get those in there if you have them. So that's kind of, that's it. Like that's the whole process really. And if you look at it, it really is a creative engine process where you have, even starting with the self-forgiveness piece is starting in the reflection part of like reflecting on where you're at and, what's going on with you and why is this the case? And then you get everything together and then you decide and figure out what you're going to do. And then you act and then you need to reflect again. What's next? How am I going to move forward? What did I learn from this? Where are we going with this? It's just one more way of looking at going through that cyclical process. And again, I encourage you guys to check out the Creative Focus Workshop and in particular this go through this join page. It will offer you a $100 discount on the enrollment fee for the workshop and also gives you access to the short form version of the Creative Engine class that will dive into this framework that I keep talking about and really lay it out for you in a way that I think is going to be really helpful. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions pop up, so we might end a little early. But I will be back on Friday. I'm still waiting and still here for a few more minutes if people have questions. But I'll be back on Friday for our final meeting. Can't believe it. It's amazing. To talk about next steps. Like, this is the end of the book. This is the last chapter. What happens next? Where do we go from here? I think the big question really is this, how do we want to continue moving forward with Creative Focus? How do you want to make sure that this is part of your life in an ongoing way? How can you ensure that? How can you make sure that this is here for you? The Growing Gills Book Club group will be open for another week after that. And so you'll have a chance to get in there and get up whatever you need and, get in touch with people and those kinds of things. And then I'm going to archive the group. So I hope everybody dives in and, gets in touch with everybody now. I encourage you to really use it now while we have it. Allie says, question number 1 is self-forgiveness and 2 is clean your desk. And then I lost track. Is there a 3? Yes, decide. So clean your desk is collect. Then you have to decide. You have to sort things out into, the different categories, different boxes. This is all laid out in the chapter. You can reread it all. And when you decide those things, then you are able to start taking action on one thing at a time. And even if you are like, I have like literally 15 things that have to get done right away, you still can literally only do one at a time. So you have to decide, and making that decision and putting everything out of sight, everything else out of sight, is what can help you get into action. Another thing that's really helpful at that point is to co-work with somebody. So tell somebody, hey, I'm working on this right now, over phone, Slack, video, whatever. Find out what they're doing. You're doing something too, and work for half an hour or an hour, whatever it is, report back, how far did you get? And just knowing somebody's there and sort of paying half attention to what's going on with you can be really, really helpful, especially if you're just trying to get back into this. Syl says, what do you do when you see yourself stepping untold habits? I think you must be saying bad habits or something like that. Old habits. Falling into old habits or something like that. Well, I think you look at what your habit triggers are. Like if you're getting into some old habits that you don't like, old bad habits, what is the trigger for that habit? What is the moment at which that habit kicks into gear? And how can you either retrain that trigger to be something else, or be hyper aware of that trigger and try to be super aware of like how you roll down a hill at that point. Like how do you get into that habit at that point? Habits are about unconscious behavior, really, like just not using the decide phase, right? Like just going from stuff to acting. And when you just fall into that, you can often fall into stuff that you don't want to be doing. Everybody's done it. Everybody here recognizes that. It's totally a normal thing to happen. But habits are triggered by things. They're triggered by thoughts. They're triggered by actions. They're triggered by associations. They're triggered by places. So do some analytic work. This is reflect phase on the habit that you're trying to avoid. Figure out what are those circumstances in which you do this thing, and then change the circumstances. Just disrupt it. And that can really help you to start resetting and creating a new habit. Use something similar to trigger something new and start building that new habit. I'd love to see your takeaways in the chat, so please post those. Diane says, I know about taking a break, but how do you do it without feeling guilty? Well, I think you have to be very clear that I am taking a break for a reason. This is the reason. You tell yourself, this is what it is. This is why I'm doing it. And so I'm taking this break and I'm doing it because reasons. And I am standing up for this as a principle. And the guilt can nag at you, but I think you have to continue to stand up for yourself in that way. All right, I'm seeing Allie. So it's really decide and then act. Yes, it's collect all the stuff, then decide, then act, then reflect. So those are the 4 stages of the creative engine. Again, I recommend that you check out the, I just posted the link again. Check out the free class that's at this link, or like you have to sign up and you get sent through to the link where you can see the free class. And that'll really give you the whole overview of the creative engine. Allison, takeaway, I don't have to have closure. It's okay to just press pause on other projects. Yes, you can press pause. You have to press pause on other projects in order to finish things. And when you are then closing smaller loops and getting them out of the way, it really will give you confidence, make you feel better, feel the forward momentum, and you can really use that then to do the stuff that's harder and more, more resistant. Liz, takeaway, the creative engine is a continuous process, not a one-time project. Yes. Spiral staircase, everybody. Keeps going. Marjorie, do you have a timeline of publishing the second edition of Growing Gills and or first edition of the creative engine, which I suggested combining under the second title is more clear at a glance? No. After doing all this work on it, I'm, all the revision work that I've been doing on it, I'm like, there's so much I want to do on this book that I think I'm still on the fence about whether it makes sense to do a second edition, just clean things up. Or write an entirely new book. And if I write an entirely new book, then we're talking years because I don't have time for that right now. But I would like to, but it's not something that's on my list at the moment. The cleanups is sort of like cleanup level revision, second edition. I might do sometime this year, but it's really not a high priority for me right now. I have a lot of things I want to be doing. So all of the meetings that we've gone through here, I've sort of recorded my thoughts publicly, and so hopefully those are things you're going to be able to get. Those are all archived on my blog, even once the group is archived. All right. Cool. Lots of good stuff. All right. I got to go. I've got another meeting right now. So thanks for coming, you guys. Friday, we'll meet again at 11:30 for our last meeting. I hope everybody comes. I would love to see everybody there. Keep posting takeaways, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody.